Zuckerberg has finally given up on the Metaverse. To most of you, this probably isn't that surprising. Within just the past 2 years, the Metaverse has lost Meta $24 billion. But despite the hefty losses, the memes, and the lackluster adoption rates, it seemed like Zuckerberg was willing to push forward no matter what. He was ready to bet $100 billion on the Metaverse over the next couple of years, so there was plenty of headroom left. But it seems like there was one factor that was big enough to scare him away from the Metaverse: shareholders. Zuckerberg technically has over 50% voting control at Meta, so he's allowed to do whatever he wants and no one can fire him. But that doesn't mean that he can do whatever he wants and the stock will perform well. If investors don't believe in the future of the company, they're gonna dump the stock in masses, and that's exactly what's been happening at Meta. Between late 2021 and late 2022, Meta stock plummeted an eye-watering 77%. This translates to a market cap loss of, wait for it, $800 billion. It looks like this is exactly the reality check that Zuckerberg needed as he completely shifted his tone on the Metaverse. Of course, he hasn't publicly denounced the Metaverse or admitted that it's a failure, but actions speak louder than words. Within the past 6 months, Meta has laid off a total of 21,000 employees. This equates to about 25% of their total workforce, and I think you can guess which department was affected the most. Also, the layoffs may not even be done yet. There's rumors that Meta may have one last round of layoffs in May. So, by the time you're watching this, Meta may have laid off another 5,000 to 10,000 employees. This would effectively bring Meta's employee count down to pre-pandemic, pre-Metaverse levels. Zuckerberg has also completely stopped talking about the Metaverse. I wonder why. Unsurprisingly though, this has allowed Meta to destroy their recent earnings report, and that's despite still paying mountains in severance. Within the next 6 months or so, as the severance phases out, Meta will not only be larger than ever, but they will also be more efficient than ever. Investors couldn't ask for anything more, and they've already started to price in this scenario. Within just the past 6 months, Meta stock has bounced back nearly 200%. This has allowed Meta to reclaim their spot as a Fortune 10 company, and for Zuckerberg to add a cool $42 billion onto his fortune just this year alone. So here's the story of Zuckerberg's insane gamble with the Metaverse and how he managed to walk away stronger than ever. Taking a look back, the story of the Metaverse dates back nearly 10 years at this point to 2014. At the time, Facebook would acquire Oculus for $2 billion, which allowed them to take their first steps into the world of virtual reality. Facebook wasn't alone in this venture, as a bunch of big tech companies were also interested in this future. Samsung and Sony were working hard at creating their own VR products, and who could forget about Google Cardboard? But over the years, most of these companies have scaled back their VR efforts or straight up discontinued their projects altogether. They could all see what we saw. The tech just wasn't ready for mass adoption. But despite the early red flags, Facebook would not only lean into VR, but Mark would go on to bet the entire future of the company on it. So what happened? Well, a lot of Mark's choices make a lot more sense when it's contextualized with the state of Facebook as a whole. By the second half of the 2010s, Zuckerberg had come to the realization that social media is extremely fickle. There's always a new kid on the block that's soaking up all the attention. First, there was Friendster, then MySpace, then Facebook, then Instagram, then Snapchat, then TikTok, and now, potentially BeReal. So, the reality was that it was just a matter of time until Facebook was replaced. At first, Facebook tried to address this by just buying out the new kid for stupid sums of money. He bought Instagram for $1 billion and WhatsApp for $19 billion, but flexing his wealth only got him so far. Pretty soon, the people that he was trying to buy out started to reject his deals. Snapchat was likely the first notable example, rejecting a $3 billion buyout from Facebook. Realizing that he couldn't just buy out everyone, Mark naturally shifted his strategy to copying everyone. At the end of 2012, for example, Facebook launched Poke, which was a shameless ripoff of Snapchat. You probably don't even remember this though, as it was such a massive flop. Learning from this, Facebook would stop trying to launch new apps. Instead, they would just implement popular features into their existing apps. For example, they implemented stories and reels into Instagram. But while these features were decently successful for Instagram, they by no means stopped Snapchat or TikTok from succeeding in their own right. So, by the late 2010s, Mark understood that he couldn't just buy or copy his way into stability. The only way to achieve stability was to shift to a more stable industry. His dream with Facebook was always to build a social highway and to use advertisers as toll booths. The hole in this plan is that when it comes to social highways, people are always moving cities. What Mark really wanted was to control something like the internet, but it was obviously impossible for Facebook to take over the internet itself in the late 2010s. If they wanted to control something so large, the only option was to get in early into the next internet. And this brings us into Mark's obsession with virtual reality, or the Metaverse. Things didn't start off hopeless for the Metaverse. In fact, they started off pretty bright actually. Oculus was by far the most respected player within the VR scene, and hardcore gamers loved their products. But there was one major limiting factor: cost. Oculus headsets were simply unaffordable for the masses. The Oculus Rift came in at $600, which in itself isn't cheap, but that was by no means the only expense. The Rift was a tethered headset, meaning that it had to be connected to a PC to function. Of course, you could connect the headset to your beaten-up laptop, but if you wanted any sort of meaningful VR experience, you had to buy a multi-thousand-dollar PC, which just wasn't practical for the average Joe. So Zuckerberg decided to address this concern head-on with the Meta Quest 2, which came in at a mere $300 to $400, no PC required. Suddenly, the price of VR was comparable to that of a gaming console. In fact, it was cheaper than most gaming consoles. The main reason for this was that Meta was taking massive losses on these units, but that was okay. They just wanted everyone to buy and use the darn thing, and they could figure out how to monetize later. Initially, it seemed like their plan was playing out perfectly. Given the hype around VR and the relatively affordable price of the Meta Quest 2, people were buying it in the masses. In fact, Meta has sold nearly 20 million of these headsets, but there was just one teensy tiny problem. No one was using the headsets. People would buy it, try it out for a few days, and then use it as a dust collector indefinitely. Why, you ask? Well, the biggest reason is simply that the experience just sucks. The entire point of VR is to have an immersive, almost real-life experience. And the only way to do that is to use powerful NVIDIA GPUs paired with airplane jet engines as coolers. When you try to do the same thing with an iPhone chip for $400, well, a 360-degree Me world is what you get. The hardware was so limited that Meta couldn't even produce legs for your avatars, much less make them look realistic. In fact, they couldn't even produce legs for demonstration purposes. They would end up cheating using pre-rendered animations. And don't even get me started on the enterprise side of things. Mark was selling the Metaverse as a way for business professionals to conduct more authentic virtual meetings that felt like real life. Not a bad idea in theory, but with the graphics like this, these meetings by no means felt professional and genuine. If anything, they felt childish and out of place in a corporate setting, not to mention expensive. Unsurprisingly, virtually every company has decided to stick with Teams and Zoom. We should mention that after receiving all this negative feedback about lackluster immersion, Meta would come out with a higher-end headset called the Meta Quest Pro for $1,500. But by the time this headset came out, the pros were already out and the reputation of the Metaverse had already been tarnished. Not to mention, the Pro wasn't all that much better to begin with. So let's just say, the Meta Quest Pro wasn't received very well, and Meta would end up slashing the price by $500 just 5 months after release, marking the beginning of the end. There's really no way to sugarcoat it. Meta is pulling back on the metaverse hard, and it's no wonder why. They're far from producing the tech and experience they want to. Developing the metaverse is taking a massive toll on the company's bottom line and stock price, and the reputation of the metaverse is beyond repair. Now, of course, if you ask Zuckerberg, he'll tell you that they're by no means ditching the metaverse, but all of the evidence is against this. For starters, Meta has laid off a quarter of their workforce. With a median salary of $300,000, this is saving Facebook roughly $6.3 billion every year. Seems counterintuitive for someone who's planning on investing $100 billion into the metaverse. But likely the best evidence that Meta is indeed moving away from the metaverse is the fact that Zuckerberg has become obsessed with something else: AI. According to Meta CTO Andrew Bosworth, Mark, Meta's chief product officer Chris Cox, and him are all spending most of their time working on AI, and more specifically, generative AI. It seems that Mark has very much gotten caught up with the ChatGPT hype, and he wants to get a piece of the action. Meta has even announced their own large language model called Llama, and they're currently working on releasing this to researchers. Bosworth has also confirmed that they're working on releasing a commercial AI product by the end of this year. All of this may seem a bit confusing. It seemed like Zuckerberg was super gung-ho about the metaverse, so how did he pivot so quickly? Well, the reality is simply that Meta's commitment to the metaverse was simply overhyped by the media. In fact, the metaverse wasn't even Zuckerberg's first attempt to pivot Facebook away from social media. Before he got obsessed with VR, Zuckerberg was actually trying to build a space business. He was launching a bunch of solar-powered drones and atmospheric satellites with the goal of trying to create satellite-based internet similar to Starlink today. But as he saw that this wasn't picking up any steam and that SpaceX was gonna do it themselves, Zuckerberg didn't hesitate to kill off the program completely and switch to the metaverse. So who's to say that Zuckerberg isn't willing to do the same thing with the metaverse? Given that the metaverse was much more consumer-oriented and futuristic than their space plan, it garnered a lot more media attention. But for Facebook, it was just another attempt to break free from social media. By now though, it's become clear that this path is not so viable, and they're accordingly pulling back substantially. This isn't to say that Meta is completely ditching the metaverse quite yet. They're still pouring resources into the idea, but they're by no means adamant to sticking to just that. If they can get something else to work instead, like AI, even better. The bottom line is that Meta has become a mature social media company, meaning that they only have two paths moving forward. They can either go all in on social media, optimize their operations, and become a dividend giant, or they can try to hit the next big thing. With his performance over the past 6 months, Zuckerberg has made it clear that he can achieve the former at any time within a matter of 12 months if he wants to. But what he really wants is the latter. He wants to grow Meta to the next magnitude, and the only way to do that is to hit a grand slam. He took a few swings at the metaverse and it looks like he struck out, but being only 38 years old with majority control over the 8th largest company in the world, I assure you, he has a lot of swings left. So while people love mocking the metaverse, it's Zuckerberg that's getting the last laugh. Are you a fan of the metaverse? Comment that down below. Also, drop a like if you think that people would be better off focusing on their own lives instead of critiquing others. And of course, consider checking out our Discord community to suggest future video ideas and consider subscribing to see more questions logically answered. But until then, I'm Hari, and I'll see you guys on the next one.